Shein is getting banned. According to a new law, even doing your Shein hauls could get you fined for over $100,000. But why? Hello Internet, welcome to Style Theory, the show that's guilty of having good taste. But not everyone is having such a good day. In fact, if you're Shein or TEMU, you might be having the worst day ever. In June, the French Senate passed a bill to halt the rapidly growing influence of ultra-fast fashion brands like Shein and TEMU. It passed almost unanimously, with 337 votes in favor of the bill and only 1 against. Oh man, I would hate to be the one guy who voted against this, because can you even imagine what that was like?
You need to leave!
No, my social anxiety cannot even take it. This bill wasn't messing around. It's ready to play hardball with the biggest names in fast fashion. It's calling for higher fees, banning any and all ads for fast fashion. And here is the craziest part. This bill could make it illegal, yes, illegal, for influencers and non-influencers to even show off their purchases from Shein or TEMU online.
But you know what isn't banned? Telling you that if you go to the link in our description and use code StyleQueen, you can get 10% off this Style Theory Blue Gamer Subs bottle.
Now, the reason that France is taking such a huge swing against fast fashion is in order to protect the planet. But will it work? Can this bill actually do anything to take down the titans of fast fashion? Would stopping them really make a difference to the state of our planet?
And is this something that you and I should be calling our representatives about to get them to jump on the bandwagon?
It's time for me to embrace my inner Elle Woods and dust off my high school French as we unpack how France could be inciting a war against fast fashion. Before we can talk about how France might be changing the game against fast fashion, we have to talk about why they would want to do it in the first place. Fast fashion has a big reputation, a big bad reputation. Fast fashion refers to clothing that's made cheaply in order for it to be made quickly. Hence the term fast fashion. You get it. Despite what many may think, fast fashion isn't a new trend. The idea dates all the way back to the 1960s when the US and Europe first started to outsource the majority of their textile labor to other countries in order to keep up with the high demand for new affordable clothes. Though it wasn't until the 90s where the phrase fast fashion first made an appearance in the New York Times as a way to describe the rapidly growing business called Zara. Zara made headlines, both good and bad, for shortening the design to rack pipeline, saying it would only take 15 days to take a new idea from concept to store. To put that into perspective, slow fashion, or traditional fashion, can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to even a year or more to go from design and concept into something that you can hold in your hands or buy in the store. This changed everything, and that speed has only gotten worse and faster in recent years as brands try to keep up with these rapidly changing trend cycles, which, thanks to social media, specifically TikTok, has gotten incredibly short, with trends lasting from just days to maybe weeks at a time if you're lucky. In order to capitalize on every single microtrend that pops up on your feed, fast fashion brands like Shein and TEMU have to be constantly putting out new designs. Shein alone puts out anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 new designs onto their website every single day. In total, fast fashion brands are producing roughly double the amount of clothes now than they were back in 2000. That means that today, these fast fashion brands are flooding the market with more and more clothes that have to end up somewhere. And all that does is take that environmental strain that's down to clothing manufacturing and make it that much worse.
Yeah, clothes aren't great for the environment, though few things that humans do actually are. But this is specifically talking about ones made with bad materials, under bad circumstances, and in very excessive quantities.
For example, it takes around 2,700 liters, or about 30 bathtubs full of water, to make one cotton t-shirt. That's enough water to keep one person hydrated for 900 days. Yeah, no, I can't drink a shirt. But it gets worse.
Around 1/5 of all water pollution on Earth can be traced back to the dyeing and finishing processes we apply to our fabrics. And then you have the microplastics.
You know, those itty-bitty little pieces of plastic that we can't see but have been linked to multiple types of health issues in both humans and animals.
35% of all microplastics found in our oceans can be traced back to textiles, aka your clothes.
Please. And that's not even talking about all the energy and fossil fuels that's needed to harvest, manufacture, and ship it all.
According to an analysis by Business Insider, about 10% of all global carbon emissions come from the fashion industry. That's the same amount of carbon output as the entire European Union.
Which includes our diva of the day, France.
Now, I want to clarify that this is not me saying all clothes bad, and I am not encouraging anyone to go out and become like a nudist or something. In fact, please don't do that. Like, respectfully, I do not want to see all of that.
However, this environmental problem wouldn't be such a big deal if we were buying clothes in order to wear them for years and years, instead of, buying micro trends to keep up with what's popular on TikTok.
On average, the modern person wears a single item of clothing just 7 times before throwing it away. According to Earth.org, that means that each item is being worn 36% less now than they were 15 years ago.
Yikes. But it's not all down to the customer. A lot of it is about the quality of the clothes themselves.
To keep items cheap, both for the company and the consumer, most fast fashion garments are made from synthetic materials like polyester and use subpar stitching techniques that are faster to do.
This leads to less durable items, which are easier to wear and tear than a better made garment.
And since that item is cheap, you're less likely to try to repair it if it gets damaged. Instead, it's more cost-effective and time-efficient to just toss it into the garbage and go get a new one. Nowadays, people are buying 60% more clothes than they did back in 2000.
And then most of it just ends up in a landfill.
The average American throws away 82 pounds or 37 kilograms of clothing every year. And over in France,
our diva of the day trying to fight the system.
They are throwing out 35 pieces of clothing every second. In total, that means that an absolutely insane 92 million metric tons of clothes end up in our planet's landfills each year.
That is an entire garbage truck load of clothes being dumped every single second. And it's a problem that's not going away anytime soon. Most of these items are not biodegradable, or they take hundreds of years to actually break down. So yeah, those piles of clothes sitting in landfills are not going away anytime soon. They're sticking around. I think you get the idea. Someone has to do something, and France just might be the one to do it. Now that we understand the problem, let's take a look at how France is trying to become the solution. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, France passed a bill that was called this long French name. I'm not even gonna try pronouncing that because I saw how you roasted my pronunciations in the K-pop Demon Hunters episode. We're not gonna do that. No. Anyway, this bill, which I'm gonna nickname the bandwagon bill for use in this episode, aims to reduce the environmental impact of the fast fashion industry. And remember, everyone was on board this bandwagon bill, except that one guy. To be fair though, that guy did try to explain why he voted that way.
Listen, the machine is broken. I meant to vote yes, and I demand a recount because this is fake news. Read it. I voted yes.
But back to the bandwagon bill. What exactly does it do? Well, with a little help from my friend Google Translate, because spoiler alert, the entire thing was in French, I was finally able to read through the entire thing. And it took me while.
The main purpose of this bill is to add regulations for what it calls ultra-fast fashion.
This is just another name for the fast fashion that we talked about earlier, just a little more extreme. It's the same poor quality, constant additions, and lack of incentive to keep and care for your item. And companies who engage in those ultra-fast fashion practices will be subjected to a ton of new rules, regulations, and of course, fees. Oh boy, fees.
You can sort these new rules into 3 three main buckets.
The first is transparency.
According to the bandwagon bill, on websites where these products are sold, companies are required to include messaging that encourages customers to reuse or repair damaged items. They must also disclose the social and environmental impact of the products that they are selling to their customers.
And before you ask, no, they cannot put it at the bottom of the website where no one will see it in a font that no one can read.
These messages have to be written in legible text, placed right next to the price of the product, and be included on every page where that product is featured.
It's kind of like the fast fashion equivalent of the Surgeon General's warning, which tells you about all the health risks of cigarettes and is printed right on the package every time that you buy it here in the US. Yeah, sometimes the US does smart things. Sometimes. But that's not all.
Companies will also be forced to display what country the piece of clothing was manufactured in, also right next to the price and in the same sized font.
Oh boy, that is starting to look kind of crowded, huh? Well, that's kind of the point. It's an incentive for these businesses to stop these ultra fast fashion bad practices. But for sake of this explanation, let's just say that those companies are willing to put up with all of that extra text. What happens next? Well, that brings us to bucket number 2, the money, honey. This bill deals out some hefty fines to anything sold in France that's considered to be made unsustainably, which by definition, all fast fashion products are.
And when I say that these fines are big, I mean like big. In 2025, the fine starts off at €5, which is about $5.78 per item. Yes, per item. That fine can then be raised up to a maximum of 50% of the item's value. To start, this fine is scheduled to go up €1 per year every year until it reaches a max of €10 or $11.55 in 2030.
Which I know doesn't seem like much, but when you remember just how many items companies like Shein and TEMU put out on a daily basis, that starts to add up really quick. And all that money being raised by these fines, well, a portion of it will go to eco-organizations, ones that are dedicated to improving the recycling infrastructure across France. We love to see it.
The bill also introduces a new parcel tax, which costs €2 to €4 on packages sent to French customers from non-EU countries, only if that package weighs less than 2 kilograms, or about 4.4 pounds.
This is a sneaky way of trying to make shipping ultralight items, like say some clothes, a little more expensive and a lot less tempting. What? It's a fact! Humans hate paying for shipping. But the bandwagon bill isn't just adding a bunch of fees. It's subtracting some tax loopholes that companies like Shein and TEMU have been exploiting for years in order to save some money.
In France, as in most countries, companies and individuals can get tax breaks for making charitable donations. This is done either in cash or by donating items, like say, clothes.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're thinking. In France, that tax deduction can be as much as 60%, which is a lot of money. And that means that losing that loophole is a big deal to these companies. And despite all of that, it is actually this third bucket where France woke up and chose violence.
Effective January of 2026, France is instituting a complete and total ban on all advertising for products and companies that engage in ultra-fast fashion practices.
And it gets even crazier because it's not just official sponsored ads that are being targeted by the bandwagon bill. Indirect promotions are also at risk.
I actually printed out this section of the bill because I want to read it to you. It's just wild. So to quote our translated version of this bill, persons engaging in commercial influence activities electronically, i.e. social media influencers, whether for payment or free of charge, are prohibited from any direct or indirect promotions of products that fall under this ultra fast fashion bill. Yikes.
TLDR, influencers, whether they're paid or not, will not be able to promote these fast fashion brands.
And given the specific language used here, it means that even if you are not an influencer, if you, a regular everyday person, buy a bunch of stuff from Shein, you legally cannot show it off on social media or you'll be fined.
It is basically a ban on any Shein or TEMU haul video, and their inclusion in other videos could be seen as promotion. So your OOTD with a cardigan from Shein or your house tour with your rug from TEMU could be seen as you endorsing those companies and could get you fined. Oh, and if you violate this section of the bandwagon bill, you could be fined upwards of 100,000 euros, which is roughly 117,000 US dollars.
Can you afford that? Because I can't afford that. Nope.
And it makes any of that money that you saved by buying on Shein or TEMU pretty much worthless. Okay, that is a lot to take in. So, what happens now? On the surface, it basically looks like France went nuclear on the fast fashion industry. And the truth is, they kind of did. This is no joke, one of the biggest things to happen in the fashion industry in decades. Okay, so do I feel bad for these fast fashion companies? Well, the short answer is no. But the long answer is also no! But I do care about the wider implications that this bill carries outside of France. Because reminder, this bill does only currently affect companies and influencers operating inside of France. That being said, France isn't the only one to try to use laws to combat the fast fashion industry. There have been similar bills passed throughout the EU that are trying to do the same thing, though to varying levels of intensity. France kinda went hard.
France really is like that girl. Like, we stan a diva. The other important thing to note about the bandwagon bill is that technically it hasn't become law yet.
Now look, I'm not about to become the French version of Schoolhouse Rock and start singing about how a bill becomes law. However,
much like in the US, the French parliament has two branches, the National Assembly and the Senate. And both houses have to pass the same exact bill before the president can sign it into law. Last year, the National Assembly created its own version of this fast fashion bill that passed unanimously.
No accidental button press this time. One time.
However, when that version of the bill finally made its way to the Senate, they added a bunch of new provisions, including most of the saucy bits that we talked about today. Now, this version needs to either be passed by the National Assembly, or the two groups will need to meet somewhere in the middle before it can be signed into law.
And so there is the possibility that some of the more intense parts of the bandwagon bill that we discussed today won't actually be made into law. But considering how everyone, or almost everyone, was on board with this version of the bandwagon bill, there is a high likelihood that it could make it through to law as is. However, there is one other not so small problem with the bill as is, at least if you happen to be some other not so small companies.
Throughout this video, I continuously talked about how this bill affects brands like Shein and TEMU.
But what about other companies? Companies like Zara, the OG fast fashion company, or H&M, or ASOS.
Not only are these brands based in Europe, where all of these laws happen to be popping off, they are all considered fast fashion brands. So does that mean that they also are going to be subjected to all the rules and fines just like Shein and TEMU? While this bill does specifically target what it calls ultra fast fashion, aka the biggest offenders in the fast fashion space, that definition is pretty vague.
Like how much fast fashion needs to be produced for it to fall under ultra fast fashion. The bill doesn't specify. As it turns out, this is actually pretty common with French law. They tend to leave those kind of details out of their bills.
It's kind of a, the government will figure this out later, it's not my problem kind of deal, which I don't get. According to the French politicians, when they say ultra fast fashion, they are almost exclusively talking about Shein and TEMU, not their other fast fashion counterparts.
To quote French Senator Jean-François Langio,
the clarifications made by the Senate make it possible to target players who ignore environmental, social, and economic realities, notably Shein and TEMU, without penalizing the European ready-to-wear sector.
This implies that while they will be going after Chinese companies like Shein and TEMU, they won't be going after European companies like the Swedish H&M or the Spanish Zara. Though Though unfortunately for ASOS, who is based out of the UK, which is no longer part of the EU, the wording is a little more murky. While the bandwagon bill isn't going after all of fast fashion yet, it is going after fast fashion's biggest hitters.
Shein and TEMU are on a completely different scale when it comes to fast fashion. Where Shein releases around 2 to 10,000 new designs per day on its website, Zara releases an average of 19, and H&M only releases 12. No, not 12,000, 12.
Don't get me wrong, this bill, even with its flaws and potential revisions, is still a huge deal. It paints a target on the backs of these huge companies, and it's a target they're unlikely to be able to shake off.
Hopefully, this bill is just the first of many. I hope that it inspires the likes of the EU, the UK, and heck, maybe even the US to take the fast fashion crisis seriously.
And who knows, maybe this will be the spark that lights the flame of a fast fashion revolution.
Hey, that's just a theory. A style theory. Keep shopping smart. Up next on Style Theory.
Are Amazon Prime Day deals a scam or the best thing to happen to your wallet since the original Black Friday?